everyone, I am Rebecca from ChemKnits, and today we are going to play with some really big skeins. So big, I can't fit it onto my mat anymore. The center pole in my Nitty Knotty is 4 feet long, which means that we are creating this 12-foot skein. Each of the skeins, since it's a tube, is taller than me. And we are going to dip dye these into a food coloring mixture to break the color. This should give us a more gradient self-striping kind of thing, where you should see the color transition from one to the next, from dark to light and back again, as you are knitting with it. And yes, I plan to swatch at the end of this video. Today's video is sponsored by Christina, and I am really excited to give this a go. In addition to the reusable nylon zip tie that I always use, I did add some butterfly ties around the skein to hopefully keep this from getting too tangled. Today we are using Knit Picks Swish DK, which is 100% superwash merino, and it does have some nice bounce to it. So when I say that this is a 12-foot skein, it's definitely, I didn't pull tight or anything, but when I go and take this off the Nitty Knotty, you can see that it did sort of snap back a fair amount. But I guess measurement wise, let's see, that's 3, it's at least 12 feet. This is certainly the longest skein that I have wound on a Nitty Knotty myself. And honestly, it went fairly quickly. I twisted the skeins up to store them so that way hopefully we don't end up with a tangled mess. But in general, dip dyeing is a really great technique because things end up staying fairly ordered. And I'm excited because I haven't tried dip dyeing a super long skein like this yet. I've dip dyed blanks, I've dip dyed normal skeins, which are probably around 3 to 6 feet. But yeah, I'm excited. Christina, I can't wait to see what you think. And if you would like to learn more about sponsoring an episode of Dyepot Weekly, you can find a link to the listing in the ChemKnits Creations Etsy shop in the video description and iCard. I pre-soaked the yarn in plain tap water overnight, but with the Knit Picks Swish DK, I definitely could have just done this for 20 or 30 minutes. If you want to learn more about Swish DK or any of the other materials I'm using today, you can find affiliate links in the video description. With the Wilton Colorite food coloring system, I mixed up this bluish purple that had about 30 drops of the base blue, 8 drops of base red, and 6 drops of base pink. I wanted to have more food coloring. So that way, since we're using 200 grams, this is a similar amount I've used for a really deep saturated color on 100 grams, but I ran out of blue. So we're going to modify things, and I think that this will still give a really pretty color. Even if we end up with some pastel on one end, I think that this sort of repeating gradient we're going to create is going to be awesome. I am using my 8-quart dedicated dye pot because it's larger than a lot of the ones that I would use for food coloring. I wouldn't ever put acid dyes in a food pot, but using food coloring in a dedicated dye pot is totally fine. In here we have 16 cups of water with 2 tablespoons of white vinegar heating up. This is the same proportion and level of acidity that I use when I break different food coloring colors. But I wanted more water volume to slow things down. I suppose I could have used less acid as well, but I'm hoping that I will be able to use a lot of this yarn. I squeezed out a lot of the water from our pre-soaked yarn. There's no way I'm going to be able to hold the whole thing in dip dye, so I have this pan which I will place sort of next to the pot to help take some of that weight and pressure off of me. I might also use a step stool, but yeah, I'm really excited. Okay, Christina, here we go. I'm going to pour in the dye, but I'm also going to rinse out this cup. There we go, to get all of that pigment in there. And now I pre-arrange the yarn. The 2 skeins will not be identical, but they should be related, I hope. Okay, this is working. I am up on a stool. And there is so much blue in here that I'm not sure if some of those oh, you can see those purples striking. Okay, I'm going to slow down a little bit though, because I already now have the whole thing in my hands. Each time I go down and go a little more in. Ooh, we are, okay, maybe I need to go a little faster. We're getting some of those blues. This is a superwash yarn, so these blues will start striking faster than if it were a non-superwash yarn. And this time, you know, there could still be reds in there, so I'm not like as concerned as I might be like on another project. But I want to, can I see the color of the water? Nope, I cannot. I mean, it's looking pretty blue with what I'm seeing on the yarn. So the goal is to be able to capture those blues so we can have this dramatic feeling gradient on here. Which, I mean, I think normally, like, once I start seeing that blue, I then add the rest of the yarn in. But today, I don't mind. I think it's a little pastel. Okay. But now, I do think I'm going to go ahead and add the whole thing. So how long did that take? About, not even 2 minutes. That is not bad. I'm going to go ahead and add a little more acid now. 1, 2, 3 tablespoons. Sometimes I wait, but I want those reds struck. Oh dear. And I don't want to get boiling water on my camera. I want those reds to start striking. I'm not sure if we'll get reds on this other end, but we definitely have breaking and have a beautiful gradient, and honestly, more pigment than I thought. If I'd been able to add more blue into the pot, then this blue finish would be even deeper, but I think that we've got something really, really cool. So now I'm gonna wait for 10 minutes and then we'll come back and check in, but you know, there's a lot of pigment left, and I am gonna reduce the heat. It has been 10 minutes, and I'm not going to try to lift the whole thing up. I want to see if you can see. There is some color left in there. When I was checking with the spoon, that looks pretty clear, but there is still some pigment in here. So what I think I'm going to do is just add another splash of vinegar, but I'm going to turn off the heat and let this yarn cool off in the pot. I don't know if I'm going to let it cool completely per se, but I want to let it cool enough that those residual blues have absorbed. You can leave the heat on longer, but since this is 16 cups of water that's really hot, it's going to take a long time to cool down. And so I'm not super worried about that. But I am so excited with where this yarn has ended up. So once things are cooled, then we can go wash the yarn. Oh my goodness, this yarn is stunning. And we did absorb the rest of that dye. Now the only thing I need to be careful of is not tangling our beautiful yarn. The good news is since the ends are different colors, that also helps. I'm not expecting to see any bleeding here. And in fact, I'm just going to add some clear dish soap into this water. A lot of times I'll change the water for this step, but I'm going to do that off camera. I just wanted to look and see and show you that we're not seeing any bleeding. So I'm going to go rinse out the water, put the yarn through my spin dryer, and carefully hang it up to dry. And then we get to turn it back into a more manageable skein size. Ooh, this is beautiful. We have like a deep, it's a little bluer than eggplant, but a deep eggplant purple that goes through this like glazed red section. I mean, it's a blue, but it's like glazed with red. It's that hint of purple. And then we go into more of a true mottled blue. I am so excited to see a swatch of this yarn. Now, granted, how this transitions will depend on what you're making with it, yada, 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 but I'm curious, and I know you're curious, so we will swatch it. Now right here, I have both skeins laid out together, and the color transitions are pretty even. The skeins were the exact same length, you know, all of that was good. They might knit up differently, so there could be some minute differences, but overall, they're very, very well matched. I also want to be clear that earlier I was winding a 16-foot skein, not 12 foot. 12 foot would have had 3 feet in the middle, not the 4 that I had. So, whoops, my bad. But I would say right now that this is, in fact, probably a 12-foot skein. If I hold it up with one end on the floor, it goes like above my head, so it's at least 6 feet long, 12 feet around, maybe 13. I wouldn't necessarily call this shrinkage, except for the fact that you saw it snap back and shrink when I removed it from the Niddy Noddy in the first place. But yeah, so I didn't measure it before dyeing and after dyeing to see if it shrunk up at all. And that is something I guess that we need to keep in mind as we dye things, is that you could lose or gain yardage as you're working with the yarn. This yarn unquestionably has a lot of like spring and give to it. Here is the yarn re-skeined. The colors are beautiful, and I am really excited to go and swatch this. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go place this skein on my Umbrella Swift and then knit a little swatch for all of you. This swatch is stockinette 20 stitches across on size 6, US size 6 needles. And you can see this striping sort of gradient we're getting. And we see the stripes, but these edges are nice and blurred because of the dip dyeing, and we had that gradient transition. Now, if the skein is 12 feet, 16 feet, that's not as long as one could go. And so if we had an even longer skein, then we would be able to get wider stripes. And by wider stripes, I mean something that might have stripes that are this wide, but then would work on, say, a hat or a wider project. The thing with swatching that you need to keep in mind is that this is only 20 stitches. So maybe if you had 40 to 60 stitches for, say, some mittens, you would still see this sort of striping and gradient, but it might start looking a little bit more like micro stripes or something, because these stripes will thin out the more stitches that you have. And then if you go to a hat, well, you could potentially get some pooling. I'm not entirely sure, but if you brought this out to like 100 stitches, the stripes would be really, really thin, and it might not feel as gradient. It might feel more stripy. You can buy 6-meter skeins from Wool to Dyepot, and these are about between 19 and 20 feet long. So that gives you more space to work with. I think this is probably the limit of what I could do on a Niddy Noddy, but you could set chairs across your house and walk between them to make an even longer skein to use with dip dyeing or whatever technique you please. You're definitely not limited to what you can do on your Niddy Noddy. But man, I am so excited by this color. Christina, thank you so much for sponsoring this episode of Dyepot Weekly. I am beyond excited with how this yarn came out, and I really hope that you like it as well. The ChemKnits Creations Etsy shop is also filled with hundreds of skeins of hand-dyed yarn featured in these videos, and you should really go check it out. If you're a dyer yourself and you don't need more yarn, I know, but seriously, if you don't need more yarn, but you still want to help support and contribute to the content here on the ChemKnits Tutorials YouTube channel, go and check out the ChemKnits Patreon. There's a lot of fun perks, behind-the-scenes sneak peeks, early access to new content, and more. You can also find a link to that in the video description and iCard. Don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications so that way you never miss a new video. Lots of exciting stuff coming up and you really don't want to miss it. I am Rebecca from ChemKnits and thank you so much for watching.